Good morning. My name is Cedric Dawkins, the PR and marketing consultant for the Miami Children's Initiative. I'm sitting in for your regular host, the CEO, Miss LaTousha Daniels. Today, we're here for our next edition of Coffee with a Cop. Today, we are very excited to have our special guest, brand new City of Miami Police Chief Art Acevedo. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. Really look forward to the visit.
Thank you. Welcome to the City of Miami.
Yeah, thanks, man. I love this city. I've been here for a little over 5 weeks, and I love everything about it.
Okay, you feeling at home yet?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I'm Cubans, right? So it's kind of like coming home.
Right.
But there's everything here. You got all kinds of good food from all parts of the world.
Yes, we do.
You got your Caribbean food from Haiti and Jamaica and the Dominican. I mean, it is. I just hope I don't get any bigger than I already am.
Well, you know, we already have COVID to blame for some pounds.
Yeah, right.
You found your favorite Cafecito spot yet?
You know what? I still like La Ventanita over at Versailles because it's an old institution, and you know, all the politicals like to go there. Every time a president comes into town, they got to go to Versailles. So I like going there because I've been going there since I was a little boy, starting in 1975, and it's something that it's kind of like coming home. It reminds me of my mom and my dad. May they rest in peace. And my childhood, where we'd come here every summer.
Wow.
So Miami being here is kind of like coming home. It's a homecoming.
Hey, again, welcome.
Thank you.
So now let me say, as a newbie to the South Florida community, what have you been doing to acclimate yourself outside of going to Versailles?
You know what? I have spent I'm trying to spend a lot of time talking to the police officers internally. Meeting with community groups, with advocacy groups. You know, we're finally starting to open back up after this isolation for the last year and a half with COVID, and I've got both. We both have our vaccines. So please, if you haven't gotten your vaccine, I urge you get that vaccine. Please, the sooner we all get them, the better off we're all going to be, and we're probably going to save lives, and it may be the life of a loved one. So,
that's true.
But no, I'm just you know, hit the ground running. I always say that first impressions are lasting impressions.
That's true.
They're hard to change, so you better work at making a good impression,
a
good first impression. So we'll see what it's like, but I'm really loving it so far.
Great. Now, have you had these city tours? Did anybody taking you like on a tour of the city officially, or?
You know what's funny is Art Noriega, the manager, when I was kind of in this little courtship where they were trying to get me to come here. He took me on a tour of the city in his car, and just showed me everything. I mean, Overtown, Little Haiti, you know, Brickell, downtown, Little Havana. It's now somehow a tourist attraction, right? Wynwood. So he did take me on that tour, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, that's good. I hope it was good weather that day.
It was. I mean, we haven't had much rain. I thought we were going to get more rain. I guess it's coming.
It's coming.
It's coming. Yeah, it's coming.
One thing you'll learn is Miami is like, it'll be 95 degrees, hot sun, and
all of a sudden here comes a storm.
10 minutes later, like, poof.
Right, but it lasts for about 30 minutes and that. And then
but that's the 30 minutes that you're like walking to your car in a suit from an event, and you just get soaked. So, well, that's, you know, well, I'm glad you're getting acclimated.
Well, at least you won't have to worry about your hair getting too messed up.
No, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Just kind of wipe and keep going. Yes. Now, let me ask you, how would you say Miami differs from Houston, from which you come?
Well, I think that as it relates to, you know, Houston's a real big old melting pot, right? I mean, they speak over 110 languages in the school district. Probably the largest Muslim community, the largest undocumented immigrant community in the country. But it really truly is this melting pot. I think that we got to do a little bit more work on being more welcoming of each other. And I'm talking about my people, the Cuban people, right? Some of them are just. We got a little work to do there in terms of we should celebrate diversity, celebrate the rich cultures from around the world here, And I always say that the closer we come together,
Right.
as people, the more we realize we have so much more in common.
That's
than,
true.
Than we know.
That's true.
Because
That's true.
we all come from the same seed, right? We all come from, especially I'm a Christian, so if you go back in history and we just keep collapsing evolution of this humanity, we're all cousins,
Right.
So we all
I agree.
we all get so tied up in race and all this stuff. I'm like,
Yes.
we are all cousins, man, and we're all
Yes.
children of God, and we need to
Yes.
just go beyond the skin
color,
tone
right, exactly.
and go into what's in the content of this person's heart, what's their
Yes.
mindset. So I think that we probably have a little bit more work in that area as a community.
Well, when you mentioned diversity and like a melting pot, I think I guess that kind of makes Houston similar to Miami, because I mean, I feel like we're a big melting pot as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we have, everything from Venezuelan, Nicaraguan, Brazilian, Haitian, Jamaican, Trinidadian.
This is a little New York, right? I mean,
Yes.
but
Yes.
and it's getting more. There's a lot of anger in our country sometimes by white America because for two reasons. One, the American dream has really left a lot of that community behind. There's a lot of
Yes.
poor white people in this country, and
Yes.
nobody talks about them, right? They only
Right.
talk about they talk about Hispanics and African Americans. Nobody talks about them, so I kind of understand that
Yes.
anger, and also the fact that what's fueling and keeping society together in terms of having babies, it's immigrants, it's Hispanics, it's blacks, it's Asians, and so the white majority has now become the white
Minority in a sense,
in a lot of places. And I think there's nothing that can be done to change that. You can,
Right.
you can fear it or you can embrace it.
Right.
And one of the things I've been telling in my department is the first time in my career, I always say life's about points of reference. You can't really assess or
Right.
appreciate what's in front of you
Right.
if you've got nothing to compare it to.
Well, that's true.
Okay, so now this is my third state I've lived in and my fourth department, so I have points of reference. And I'm telling all especially my Hispanic officers, let's not forget about what it was like for Hispanic officers, Cuban officers, maybe in the 70s when the
Right.
majority was still firmly in charge. And don't
Right.
forget, we are in the South,
Right.
right? So as it relates to matters of race and discrimination and things of that nature, we've had to deal with it here like everywhere else in this country.
Yes.
And I don't want I want our folks to remember what it was like to be in those shoes, because unfortunately they haven't walked in those shoes.
Right.
So we need to be inclusive as the majority. We don't want to
Yes.
become, as we become the majority people of color, we don't want to become what we had to face for
Right.
200
Correct.
years. You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Like
We
kind
want-
of turn the table.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess in my observation, I've always felt like, you see all these different things happening around the country. I've always felt like in Miami, though, growing up here, I just don't see it. I haven't seen it, I guess. I don't feel like as much. And it's like obvious as other places. And I think it's because of we're such a melting pot. And and now we have, the suburbs where everybody kind of grows up together. They go to school
Yep.
together. So by the time they become adults and working,
Yeah.
you may be working with someone of a different culture, but you might have gone to elementary school with them,
Right.
or you might have gone to middle school with them, or your parents work together somewhere.
Yeah.
So I just think the temperature a little bit cooler
A lot better. Yeah.
here than in other places.
But I think you know what? But I think that at the end of the day, we as a city, we as a nation. I mean, come on, think about it. As imperfect as we are, we're so far ahead of the rest of the world. I mean, only in the United States of America
Right.
can a guy named Barack Hussein Obama, who is the son of a African Muslim, can become president of the United States. Only in the United States of America can this little kid, this little refugee, they got to Miami on 12/26 of 68 as a Cuban refugee with his mom, his dad, and three other a brother and two sisters, so four of us. Only in this country can this little refugee grow up to dream, grow up
Yes.
dreaming,
Yes.
and be a chief of the California Highway Patrol, the largest state police agency in the country. Be the police chief in Austin, Texas, which is another very hot city in this country. I was there for 9.5 years in that city
okay.
as a police chief, where it was just exploded. I mean, it just exploded as a city. Be the police chief in Houston, Texas. You know, they say it's the fourth largest, but really, when they count everybody, it's really the third, and because we're ahead of Chicago. And then end up in Miami, where it's all started, right?
Yes, full circle.
Full circle. I mean, only in this country. And so, for here we are, Coffee with a Cop, for the Miami Children's Initiative. It's all about young people reaching their future, young people being able to, really be everything they can be, reach their full potential. Yes. Well, man, I'm proof positive that this kid is no smarter than anybody, or Barack Obama, who look at where he came from. I mean, there's nothing you can't do. And the bottom line is, like my dad said, look, if you're not afraid to lose, you can't.
Correct.
Right? Don't let fear drive you.
Right.
Let hope drive you. Don't let hate drive you. Let love drive you. And you know what? If you can dream it, you can achieve it. And if it's not, and if you don't at least try, if you dream it and you give it your best, at least you know you have no regrets later.
Right.
Right. And never forget, especially for the young people that are watching, when one door closes,
another one opens.
Another one's open. It's so true.
Yes.
God's got you. God's got you, but you've got to have Him, and you've got to follow Him, and you've got to listen to those voices. So I'm excited. I can't wait to our PAL program here. Police Activities League is probably one of the best in the country.
Okay.
I got to Austin in 2016. In 2007. I said, hey, tell me about our Police Activities League. Oh, we got rid of it years ago. I go, what? Tell me about Explorer program, which is a program for young people to learn about policing.
Yes.
It's like a scouting program. I was a police explorer, didn't stay too long in it as a kid because I got in the Naval Sea Cadet Corps, and that was a Navy Explorer type program. No, we're going to start them back up right away. Then I got to Houston, this huge city where there's so many kids that need they need those positive influences, those activities.
Yes.
You're not going to believe this. 2016, I get there on November 30th. The following week, first week of December 16, I go, hey, tell me about our Police Activities League. Oh, we got rid of it 18 years ago.
Wow.
Unconscionable.
And which city was that?
Houston, Texas. That big old Houston H-Town. So we got Police Activities League going back. We got, Blues and Bigs, Big Brothers and Sisters.
Yes.
Where we became.
Yes, they had that here.
Young kids. It's all about the kids. Oh yeah, they're actually coming to meet with me, so we want to try to grow it. But it's really to the young people, man. It's we're here for you. And not every kid is lucky to be born into the right circumstances. Yes. There's children having children. There's people that maybe shouldn't even be parents in the first place having children. But you know what? No matter what their circumstances are, don't give up on yourself.
Right.
Find those adults that are out there. Find those positive influences that are out there. And I promise you that if you do that, you'll end up, believe in yourself, you'll end up being successful. You'll overcome. Well,
I was going to ask this later on in the interview, but the conversation has kind of led us to this question. I wanted to ask you.
Your coffee's going to get cold.
Oh, yes, I know.
Let
me take my sip.
I love M&Ms, but they have to be peanut M&Ms. I like the peanut ones.
Yes, me too. I wanted to ask you, how important do you feel, as we talked about, kind of you have to see it to believe it or to dream that you can do it. How important do you feel it is for a police force to mirror the residents of the community with regards to diversity and inclusion? Do you think that helps build trust if the officers look more like those in the community that they serve?
Look at me, look, there's people that consider diversity a four-letter word.
Wow.
Like a bad thing, right? And I like to do this experiment when I do public speaking, especially when it's not a diverse crowd.
Yes.
I say, for those of you that don't believe in diversity, I want you to, for a minute, to close your eyes. So I'll make them close their eyes, and then you still have people get nervous. And I say, I want you to imagine living in a city, in a state, in a country, where none of the police officers look like you. If you're white, they're all black, or they're black. You're all Hispanic, or they're Hispanic. They're all Asian. If you're male, they're all female. You're female, they're all male. If you're Jewish, they're all Muslim. You're Muslim, they're all Christian. because diversity is not just about skin, right? It's about everything. We want diversity of thought.
The culture.
We want
right.
diversity of culture.
Diversity of thought.
I said, now understanding human nature, that we know, the one thing we know, we are imperfect beings. I mean, I always like to say for Christians,
Yes.
Christ died on the cross for our sins, and boy, we made it worth his sacrifice, right? It was not in vain.
Right.
If you imagine that, how comfortable would you be?
Very uncomfortable.
So you know what? Diversity matters, and for this department, we're a minority majority department, and our white Anglo officers are truly a small minority. I don't want our folks. I've been telling them, don't forget where you've come from. Don't forget the road, the path we've traveled. So because I was the first Hispanic chief of police in Austin, Texas, in the history of that city. I was the first Hispanic chief of police in Houston, Texas, in the history of that city. And they're not used to, they don't know what it's like to be a first. They don't know what it's like to be the minority. I mean, I remember when I joined the California Highway Patrol. California Highway Patrol, this big old melting pot state, right? In 1986. We had close to 100 captains. 2 were people of color.
Wow.
Okay, so I know the road that I've traveled.
Correct.
And I know that diversity matters, but it's not just at the entry level. It's got to be up and down the ranks.
Right.
It's got to be diversity in the different specialized units. You can't just have, we got plenty of people of color, but they're all on patrol. None of them are working SWAT. None of them are working homicide. None of them are working
robbery or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to have diversity because there's plenty of talent. And our job as leaders is to open the doors and give people opportunities, to reach out, grab someone, touch them, give them that opportunity. And that's, I think, a leadership challenge that we should all take very seriously.
Now, what is your take on, say, community policing, and is there anything that you're changing, or has City of Miami done a good job thus far?
I think they're doing a good job, but I don't talk about community policing. I evolved that thought because too many chiefs will tell you, and I was one of them, well, we ain't got the time, man. I mean, we don't got enough cops. We're going from call to call to call to call. They can't really engage in community policing. So I said, that's a cop-out. I started, we all have a right to evolve, right? To move our position. So I was in a meeting with my city manager in Austin many years ago in Washington about community policing. And I started really thinking about it. I said, no, it's not community policing. I came up with the concept of relational policing. Okay. And I'm writing a little scribbling on this during this meeting.
Please define say it again.
Relational policing. Okay. First of all, we have to realize whether we like it or not, for good or for worse, for like a marriage, right? And for in health and in sickness, right? We are radically interdependent on each other as human beings, man. We are radically interdependent on each other. You cannot get away from that. You can't run away from that. You can try to run from it, but you ain't gonna get away from it. So we have to understand that relationships matter. Every contact, this is the mindset I want police officers to have. And it relates to everybody. I mean, neighbors should talk about this, family members, any business. And I came up with the acronym TREAT.
TREAT, okay.
TREEAT. Treat.
TREEAT. Treat. Okay.
Treat with 2 E's.
Okay. Now let's hear what that means.
You can't build relationships, and you can't change culture, and you cannot tear down bridges, walls. And build bridges via memo. You can't do it via public statement. A press conference on Twitter. You can't. You've got to get from behind your desk, officer, out of your car, officer, and engage people. And we do it this way. The T stands for transparency, right?
Okay, transparency.
Transparency matters. It's this is a sunshine state, so in terms of the public records law, so most things are public records. Well, why make somebody put in a public record? I'm trying to tell my team I want to put as much as we can online so people can get our data. So we want to be transparent. Now, there's some times where the law doesn't let you say or release something. We still got, no matter how transparent we want to be, we have to follow the law.
Right.
Then the R is about respect.
Respect.
You know what? if we as police officers learn how to talk to people, the number one complaint about police officers, it's not racial profiling, it's not brutality, it's not excessive use of force, it's rudeness. Treat people with some respect, man. Respect brings respect back.
As if it's a family member or a friend.
Exactly. So you need to, and respect starts with self-respect. Respect your uniform, respect your chain of command, respect your oath of office, respect the mission. You know, respect starts internally. Respect your coworkers. And then we got to engage people. Like I said, I ain't going to build a relationship with you if you never get to meet me outside of a 911 call loop, right? So engage people. We're working on building some relational policing time. We're going to require our patrol officers to actually, when they're driving down the street and they see a group of kids, just get out and say hi.
Yes.
And they're going to have to, because if it's not measured, it's not important. You got to measure it and you got to track it so they know that, hey, we expect you, no matter how busy they are, they always have some free time.
Yeah.
So get out of that call.
A little Dunkin' Donuts time.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, hey, we do bagels now. Right. I mean, we're healthy.
Okay,
right?
you're healthy now.
Scones. We're scones. You know, so you got to engage people. So in a transparent, respectful manner, you're engaging people. What you're doing is you're building emotional capital. Okay. We're going to need that emotional capital.
Yes.
Because the critics want police to be perfect. Like, we're never going to have a bad shooting. We're never going to have a bad use of force. I understand that that's never going to happen, and I always tell my critics, if you've got that magic, golden stuff that I can spread on people, the fairy dust, give it to me. If there's a pill, I'll take it. But I understand that that's just not the way we're wired as human beings. We are going to have bad things happen. Our job is to always pursue perfection, because the harder you pursue it, the more seriously you pursue it, you reduce those instances where bad things happen. But bad things, no matter who the chief is, no matter what the law is, no matter what it is, we're going to have bad things happen. Our job is to try to reduce those numbers.
Minimize those
and
things.
You minimize them, but you better have some emotional capital built up with that community. I mean, I can go walk you through some things that happened in Houston that in other cities, the city would have burned. But we had emotional capital built up. And we actually held people accountable, because you got to be transparent, respectful, you got to engage to build emotional capital, but then you got to hold people accountable. You got to call balls and strikes.
That's right.
Policing, the cops aren't the problem in this country. Most cops, even our biggest critics, would admit most police officers are good people. It's the chiefs, the assistant chiefs, the commanders, the majors, the lieutenants, the sergeants, the people that wear the stripes, the bars, and the stars that are the problem. People know bad policing when they see it. And when we either coddle that, justify that, so it's transparent, respectful, engaged, build emotional capital, hold people accountable. Because people know bad policing, and I said that the cops aren't the problem, it's the leadership.
The administration.
We have a problem with leadership in this country. And that goes, from elected officials to the boardroom to the newsroom. We got leadership issues in the problem in this country. We've heard this term before after an officer shoots and kills somebody. Hey, it was lawful. The use of force was, quote, lawful, but it was awful. And I'll give you an example. We don't train officers to run up. I stop somebody, stolen car. We're trained to do what's called a felony stop. Guns out, you call them out. You've seen them live on TV at the end of pursuits. You've seen them live. But what some officers do, they bum rush the car, they open the door. Unless they're a specialized unit, there are vehicle assault tactics that under some specific circumstances you use. But for a stolen car or something, they go to reach in, but put the car in park, and the suspect accelerates, and the officer does what? Shoots. Because, I had an officer decapitated and killed in L.A. Same scenario when he did that. The officer shoots because he or she's in a deadly. So it was lawful, but it was awful. His tactics, her tactics were awful. We got to hold people accountable for awful.
Yeah.
We train you for a reason to do things, and when you completely abandoned it, when there was no excuse or justification, you got to hold them up, and that's a leadership issue. And then, so if we're transparent, respectful, engaged, build emotional capital, hold people accountable, we're going to build a very important commodity at the end.
And that is?
Trust.
Trust. Yes, that's very, very important. Trust people.
See, treat relational policing. And if you just treat people the way you'd want your family to be treated, we'd be fine. And lastly, I'll add one last thing, 'cause I'll talk forever. Is that we got it wrong. You know, the good old Bible says, do unto others
Correct.
what you do want done unto you. Like, treat others the way you want to be treated. And I always tell the good Lord, Lord, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be blasphemous, but I think I want to take that in a different direction. Because if we're going to be public servants, or even brothers and sisters on planet Earth,
Right.
I should learn about your customs, your beliefs, your values, your priorities, so I can treat you the way you want to be treated.
Yes.
That's cultural competency. That is true respect. And so learn about the people you're working with, living with, engaging with. Learn about their values, their cultures, their customs, their traditions. And just as a matter of courtesy, you should do everything you can to treat them the way
You want to be treated.
they want to be treated, not the way you personally want to be. Does that make sense to you? Because it ain't one size fits all.
I don't know that. I love the whole the treat acronym. It's very poignant for what we're going through now. And so I want to ask you about de-escalation. Is that like what? I don't want to say what are the laws on the books for that, but what is the standard like training for de-escalation? Does it need to be improved, or some officers of the things that we see, around the country, are they just ignoring those principles?
First of all, we have to look. Policing has work to do, but so does every other profession. I mean, and we talked about how many people get killed by doctors negligently every year. Or you go in for a kidneys transplant, or you go in for this happens all the time. I mean, if people knew the negligence, and these people are highly trained, highly educated, very intelligent, and they're killing people negligently. Police officers have a little over 1,000 deadly shootings a year. That is dwarfs what doctors. The number of people that doctors are killing. I'm not trying to justify what we do, but I'm trying to bring some context. And they're doing that in situations where they've had all this training, all this stuff, but they've also had all kinds of tests, x-rays, CAT scans, MRIs, all this, and they still make a lot of mistakes. It's important for the community to look. I'm not trying to justify a single bad incident, but I do want to bring context to it. Because I think when you talk to people that of my age or older, we have points of reference. You talk to the older community and communities of color, they'll go, man, these kids don't know how good they have it. The police officers today are like head and shoulders better than they were in the past. And what makes me sad for the good officers is that they're being painted with a broad brush, the whole profession. We shouldn't paint people of color based on the color of their skin. We shouldn't, with a broad brush. We shouldn't paint people with a broad brush based on their religion. We shouldn't paint people. Broad brushes are not good, right? They're not good.
Never.
What makes artwork beautiful is the fine.
Right, the individuality of it.
You nailed it. We need to start looking at things through the prism of, like the media will go, hey, this department had 20 officer-involved shootings. Well, okay. But if 19 of them were absolutely legitimate and justified morally and legally, what do you want the officer to do? We should talk about bad shootings, not the total shootings. We should talk about the ones that were lawful but awful. Where the shooting ended up being lawful and justified, but how we ended up to that point was a disaster. That should matter. And so I think that we owe the public to know that when you look at the tens of millions of contacts a police officer have in this country, for everyone that goes wrong, we have a gazillion that went right. And I'll give you the example of Nicholas Chavez. The listeners, viewers can find this. Nicholas Chavez, Houston PD, you'll be able to see what happened there. Our folks, a guy that was, may he rest in peace, in mental distress, high as a kite. We end up killing him. I end up firing a sergeant and 3 officers. Well, everybody focused on that one incident, but they forgot there was 50,000 other calls, contacts, really dynamic situations where we did it right. So let's not, I think that in life, And we're living at a time in our nation's history where we're really good at tearing people down.
Mm-hmm.
We're really good at criticizing. We're not good at building people
And complimenting.
up. Right. So we need to hold bad cops accountable.
Mm-hmm.
We need to call out bad policing, but we also need to lift up the good.
Yes. No,
So a lot of
I
officers
agree
feel
with
like, man, I mean, people. And the truth is that I don't care about polls and everything else, because we saw, with President Trump, he was supposed to lose. Well, we know what polls don't really mean that much anymore. You just never know.
Right.
I think that even when we go into, the toughest neighborhoods, that most people still respect and trust the police, and we need to make sure that I want the young cops to never forget that people still, by and large, trust you. And by the way, this is an exciting time to be a cop.
Yeah.
This is an awakening in our country.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, policing has been ahead of the rest of society.
Yes.
We've been more diverse. We're like the military. We've had more diversity. We've had a zero tolerance for sexual harassment and things of that nature for 30, 40 years. If you look at I'm the president of Major City Chiefs, which is the 70 largest departments in this country, the 9 largest in Canada. When I started on that table, I'm the old man now. I got there as a very young man, probably about 40 pounds ago. And there wasn't that many faces of color around the table.
Oh, wow.
You go see that table today. Now go compare us policing to corporate America, the boardrooms in America, the newsrooms in America. In a lot of ways, we're way ahead. Because no profession is more scrutinized than the policing profession. The good, the bad, and the ugly is all being captured.
Okay.
And I think that's a good thing. Because, but we have to allow the good, not just the bad.
Well, I appreciate all of that. Now, we appreciate the time. I just have one last question before we start to wrap up. As you may know,
You didn't drink much coffee now. He didn't drink.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Coffee.
I'm sorry.
I get cold.
I just want to ask you this last question. Suddenly, Liberty City and the surrounding areas have seen a lot of recent gun violence, and more particularly with kids.
Yep.
What do you feel may be responsible for that? And is there any kind of, task force, something that you all are putting together to kind of combat that, or just kind of to get a handle on it?
Well, let me just say that gun violence it's the scourge of this country. We have more firearms in this country than we have people. We're not doing enough as a nation. Couple things. One, we need a better job of keeping guns in the hands of law-abiding Americans of sound mind.
Right.
We still don't have a universal background check. We still have you can still go to a gun show tomorrow and buy 30 weapons from so-called private sellers. And, oh, you're a private seller, huh? So I expect them to have 2 or 3 guns. Well, no, there's 100 of them you can choose from. There's, the Second Amendment's important, but with rights come responsibility.
Right.
We need to do a lot more as a nation, and sadly, Congress just won't do it. The other thing we need to do is that when people use firearms in an unlawful manner, there have to be consequences. We have people that are shooting people in this country right now in too many communities, and then the police build the case. They get charged and they get convicted, but then nothing happens.
Thank you, Chief Acevedo.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
Hi and welcome. I'm so glad that you joined us again for this segment of live MCI right here on AM 1490 Gospel Radio Station, the station that puts Jesus Christ first. We are always so excited and over the top about a chance to address you, our community, to be able to give you real, relevant, real information that keeps you abreast of what's happening in and about Liberty City. I am terribly excited because we have one of the newest additions to our community. We've remained true. We've tried to remain relevant in how we do this work. And we know as we are mourning yet celebrating the life of George Floyd, just last week, we know was the 1-year anniversary of, unfortunately, his demise and death. But we are on the heels of celebration as a community and as a global community, because we can celebrate the fact that it appears that justice has come finally come to a community who's often felt left out, felt like the least, and sometimes even the lost as it related to those who advocated on their behalf. But as we have new voices, we have the pleasure of bringing to your front today here on this radio station and even live on Facebook Live, right here on YouTube, as well as our Instagram post. We have Chief Acevedo. Now listen, that tongue didn't roll right, did it? It didn't roll right.
It's all good. It's all good.
That's my city country roll. That's that Alabama, Miami country girl. So correct me, please. Share it with us.
You can just call me Art.
Just call you
Call
Art.
me Art,
But
yeah.
Art, let's say it right, please. Just
Acevedo.
Acevedo. I gotta put my
Acevedo.
Acevedo.
Do. Like dos.
Let me
The Holy
shake my
Spirit. The Holy Spirit's alive here.
let me shake my shoulders on that. But yes, we're happy to have you here now, the chief of the City of Miami Police Department. I call myself a city country girl because I was born at Jackson Hospital, but I spent most of my primary years between here and a little town called Greenville, Alabama.
Wow.
And you've been to Greenville, you don't know it, but if you saw Forrest Gump, you were right there in Greenville.
I love that movie.
You were right there in Greenville.
Yeah.
But in my early childhood years, I will never forget, my mom was on a Jungle Queen cruise the night that the riots broke out for Art McDuffie.
Wow.
So I remember wanting my mom to come home, but I remember my city burning. I remember what was happening in what we call the pork and beans, but more officials call it now Liberty Square. I was here when all of the brand new bubble cars were purchased and was a high school senior at Miami Northwestern when the Lozano trial and verdict was being heard. I truly believe our community has seen its fair share of police and community relations in its negative appeal. But I also believe, Chief, that because of that, it has placed us at a different place where other cities and around this country are trying to get to where we are. They are now, we've been a little bit, unfortunately or fortunately, we've been trained by fire. What would you say you have added, or it's your intentions to add, to this community who seems to be balanced in some ways? What are the additional balances you intend to have for this community as it relates to African or people of color and police relations?
Wow. Well, thank you. That was a great statement. I think that what I have to offer is a person that has never forgotten the roads that he has traveled himself. One of the things I can't stand is people that they arrive, but then they forget their path. They forget their journey. I've lived, in discrimination. I've lived racism. I'm a whistleblower. So I think what I bring to this city is a leader that has had a rough journey and is informed by that journey. A leader that has professionally spent my entire career trying to keep people safe, but it's not just about safety. It's also about justice. It's about fairness. It's about inclusion. And I think what I bring to the city is a leader that is going to fight for everybody.
Well, that's important. It is important for you to say that, most certainly, because I feel, and I've said this to other individuals who sat in this seat with me, especially those who wear the badge to protect and serve, that it appears that Miami is a melting pot that won't melt. But Delrish Moss, captain of the FI, Florida International University Police Department, shared with us that it was more like a salad bowl, that it all has its different individual tastes and certain things mix and certain things don't. But when you put it together with the right kind of dressing, the right kind of chemistry, it all comes together. And I guess I'm asking, do you have that je ne sais quoi? Is that what you're bringing to the table? Because it's also a respect and regard for the powers that be, for the elements that we have. And I purposely talked about Lozano and McDuffie because there are some systems in places that we would hope will be respected and regarded. But what's your intention, again, to enhance that? So, again, working for all people. But what are some systematic things? I guess I want to hear, is it more internal things that you're looking to do? Or are there external relations that you're looking to build?
Well, I think it's all of the above, right? You can't just address one or the other. You got to address both. You've got to address our own internal culture, our own internal relationships, our own internal processes, because what happens internally impacts the way that we treat and interact with the community. So I need to make sure that we create a just workforce for all of our employees. It's inclusive. That this is the first time in my career where it seems like Hispanics seem to run everything, and I keep telling them, I've only been here less than 6 weeks. I said, look, I think some of you are forgetting what it was like when we weren't the majority as a people. We don't want to be, as a majority, what we encountered in the 60s and the 70s. And so, because I come with different points of view and references, I think I bring a very broad perspective, and I have a really big lens there's a lot of room for improvement. I hear the pride, there should be pride, but we still have not arrived. There's a lot of work to do.
Acevedo.
Hey, there we go. That was
right good. Acevedo.
Acevedo. There you go.
Yes.
You can call me Art.
I can call you Art, but I'm gonna try to get this thing right before we get off of here. But I think you speak to the heart of what many people who look more like me than look like you have cried in this community. Because whether we want to recognize it or not, those who look more like you and not like me, that there were systems in place because of people like me that provided opportunities and platforms for them to excel. And as a result, and I hope you're able to stay true to that, as a result, the bridge of equity is not is drawn further and further apart. And so the recognition of, as you opened, recognizing the path to which you have come from, which has brought you to where you are, is quite significant. So it's good to hear that someone has a cultural sensitivity and is aware of what happens, and that there is a need to bridge that. There was a shooting after some protests. Some police officers in Texas were marching and they were shot. You know that happened a few years ago.
The Dallas 5?
The Dallas, yes. And as a result, we were brought in, some community leaders were brought in with some, I won't identify which, was it county or city, but we were brought in and had a conversation about we can't have our officers shot. And there was some concerns. And what do you think needs to happen to the community? And I raised my hand as one of the minorities in the room, meaning not minority because of race, but minority because of gender. I raised my hand.
That's another strike.
That's a whole other story. I raised my hand to simply say, can you please, in roll call in the morning, tell every officer that every black person don't mean harm?
Oh, amen.
Can you just say that? And the room went
silent.
Eerily silent. And at least the chief said, how do I say that? I say just the way I said it. And I want to know, do you have that? Are you willing to have that kind of voice to say that all black people aren't criminals, but most certainly say to all black to your black force that all others are not criminals as
Right,
well.
exactly.
That everyone has equity in giving them. How do you balance that in 6 weeks? Because all kind of eyes are on you, who you are, they smoking you over, and then you're trying to come in and change a culture.
Oh, Lord, good luck.
Yeah.
Cops hate change, you know that. Look, first of all, thanks to the internet, there's a lot of information. I always have something to say. Because this is a Christian audience, and God, you know, Mayor Suarez came looking for me. I think he's the #1 cheerleader for Miami.
All right.
Francis and Art Noriega. But God opened this door for me, and I believe
Understood.
that with the deepest, with every cell of my body.
Every fiber,
the good
yeah.
Lord put me here for a reason, and it's not for me, and it's not for me to be safe, and it's not for me to not use the voice that He's giving me in this position and in my role as the Major City Chiefs president and so on and so forth. The good Lord put me here for a reason, and I keep saying, please don't let it be another Harvey, because I didn't live through Hurricane Harvey. I've never seen that kind of destruction in my career, and I've seen a lot. But before Black Lives Matter became popular for a lot of politicians to say Black Lives Matter, you can find, I was one of the first police chiefs to talk about Black Lives Matter. I invited Black Lives Matter after we had a bad officer involved shooting into my headquarters to have a press conference to try to temper the temperature down. And then my police union, it was led by a white guy. You know, I mean, first of all, I was the first Hispanic chief in the history there in Houston and in Austin. And this one was in Austin with the Black Lives Matter. They stormed out from the press conference. We had killed a young man named David Joseph Jr., 17-year-old African-American kid, totally naked, in broad daylight, unarmed.
So he was having a mental health episode.
Well, I mean, that's a clue. I mean, you figured it out.
Yes.
My officer, who at the time, gets out with his gun in his hand.
So he has nowhere to store a weapon.
No, that's called. Well, I'm going to hire you as a police academy. You're already passing. Well, he limited his force options. David Joseph immediately gets up, starts running right at him. When he gets to about 10 feet, boom, boom. Double tap like it's a rabid dog. I'm sorry, that's that's a child of God. And I fired him without hesitation, because you don't get to just shoot somebody because you're scared and the fear is unreasonable. Now let's change the scenario. David Joseph Jr. closes the gap, engages the officer. They're in a fight
for their life.
But this is another shooting that really happened
Yes.
too, where he rips that mic cord off, starts choking the officer out. The officer's about to pass out, then he shoots. That's a different story. You see, the media plays us, right? They play to our fears, because in that second scenario, the media would say, in today's news, the Austin Police Department killed and shot and killed an unarmed person of color. Well, first of all, there's always a gun in play. It's the officer's gun, instead of telling you the actual facts. But the truth of the matter is, they stormed out because I had the audacity to bring in Black Lives Matter. You know, I got news for folks. The best indicator of future performance and what I'm going to bring is what I've already done. And I said...
And talk to us a little bit about your track record. So
Well,
we're hearing...
I mean, I've been around law enforcement for 35 years.
So is Miami new for you?
This is it's Miami, right?
Right.
So my parents and I were Cuban refugees. We got here in 1968 on 12/26/68 in the Freedom Flights.
Okay.
We stayed on 12/26/68. We stayed here for 5 days, processing in the
You
old
didn't
World
do
War II
Camp
barracks.
Metacombe.
No,
you have to do any other.
They had those old World War II Army barracks at
Yeah.
the airport. That's what they used to process the Freedom Flights. We stayed for 5 days. My dad said, I want you all to learn to be American and to learn about other cultures. If we stay in Miami, you're not going to assimilate. I thought that was I really believe if my dad had not done that, I might not be here today.
Okay.
Having that, because my mindset's very different than some of the people who've never left. I say they never left the island.
Okay.
Is the term I use, because they're stuck in the 60s.
Okay.
In the way they think. I've been blessed to grow up, live, and work with people from all kinds of cultures. I've been a champion for diversity. I've been a champion for police reform. And diversity includes gender diversity.
Yes,
by the
it
way.
does. Yes, it does.
I've been a champion for the LGBTQ community.
So that's inclusion.
Because I have been the minority. I remember as a little boy trying to ask for French fries. at McDonald's, and I didn't know French fries were called French fries. So I'm sitting there, may I have potatoes, please?
Yes.
They didn't have hash browns back then.
Yes.
There's only one thing made out of a potato.
It was a French fry.
French fries. And the lady in the white shirt, which she's a manager,
Yes.
I connected these dots later. Excuse me? May I have potatoes, please?
Yes.
Excuse me? After about a minute of just toying with this little boy, she said, you mean French fries? And I was precocious. I remember thinking to myself, okay, French fries, but
It's the potato.
it's a potato.
It's made from a potato.
You can't figure that out, you know? Or being the little boy at Norwood Elementary School in the 5th grade where Mr. Lexington tells all the kids that Arturo is Cuban and all Cubans are communist. How do you think that went over?
So
we've lived those
Yes.
things. I can go down the line. I was a whistleblower. One of the best cops I ever worked with, African American, John Maddox. This guy, I like to say, he worked as hard his last day as he did on his first day. It's not one of those where they worked hard for the first 5 years and then
they figured it out.
They figured it out. No, this man got the Medal of Valor the year before his 60th birthday.
Wow.
When his two elderly neighbors, he still lived in the neighborhood, right? Where they're in Baldwin Hills, it's predominantly African American community. And he got in a shootout with two guys that were jacking these two little old ladies. And he wanted to stay beyond the age of 60 because he didn't want to retire. He was still working.
Yeah.
And
felt healthy, felt good.
They forced him to retire.
Yeah, and that's another level of discrimination, age discrimination.
Well, on the 2130 of the government code, because it's peace officers that you were allowed to do that, but you were required to do that.
Got it.
So he gets forced to retire in 2003, and unbeknownst to me, a few months later, I'm at our communications center, which is our dispatch center, which is predominantly African American workers and mostly ladies. And I'm and I'm an assistant chief. I go in there and they say, hey, how is it these 5 union guys, 5 white guys, are being allowed to stay beyond the age of 60 so they can get a pay raise and it will be built into their retirement for the rest of their lives? And I go, what are you talking about? Yes, sir, chief. The department's allowed them. I said, they can't do that. John Maddox tried. On the 2130 of the government code in California, he was forced to retire. So to make a long story short,
yes,
I took that, I blew the whistle on that, and my life was turned upside down because what's right is right, and you're going to get somebody here that you may not agree with all the time, but I challenge people to question my heart.
Got it. Well, listen, I hope that this gives us a peek into who we have behind the badge, or who's sitting at the top of the helm. And so, are there any last words or any comments for this radio audience to better understand who we have? I'd love to invite you back so that we can have another moment.
I'd love to.
But know that this community is looking for transparency.
Yeah.
We're looking for integrity.
Amen.
And we're looking for commitment. And we're looking for someone to have, as what you've expressed, a level of cultural sensitivity. And so if there are issues or concerns that maybe some of the citizens and residents of this community would have, what would be the chain that you are establishing for them to establish or share information, or if they want to build relationships?
Well, first of all, they need anything, they can write me directly at art.acevedo, A-C-E, V as in Victor, E-D-O, at Miami-police.org.
Okay.
And any concerns, any suggestions, let me know. That comes directly to me. You can see it on my iPhone. I'm always looking at my emails, and we will address it. Secondly, this is a Christian audience, the people of faith. What we're fighting as a nation is not just in the flesh. This is in the spirit. This is spiritual warfare that we're living through in these trying times. And I would ask them to keep praying for our leaders, praying for our police officers, praying for our children, our communities. We've got to lift this nation up in prayer. And lastly, when we get it wrong, call us on the carpet. But we also need to let us know when we're doing it right. I think most people would agree that most police officers are good, decent, professional people. They need to be lifted up. So let's lift up the good. Let's hold the bad accountable, but let's not give up on each other, because we are radically interdependent on each other's. As that's the way God. We're all the children of God, and we need each other. Let's not give up on each other, and let's work together to move this community forward.
Well, thank you very much for being here. I do hope, again, as you've noticed, that there is a little bit of a power base even within your own police culture, that you would look to have at least more recruitment for people of color.
Yep.
Maybe to potentially police their own communities,
Yep.
so that then there is their established level of community relations and trust. All right, thank you, AM 1490. This has been our special segment with our chief, our new chief for the city of Miami. We're so glad to have had you. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.